Have you ever made a decision so small that it ended a marriage in an ambulance? That's the question I keep coming back to. Not, was it wrong? Not, did he deserve it? Just that one. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Because the truth is, it didn't feel like a big deal at the time. Just a little swap. One tube for another. And 3 days later, there were sirens. Let me take you back to that morning. Because once you hear how it started, you won't forget how it ended. And neither will my neighbors. It was a Thursday. Unremarkable, really. Cloudy sky, dog barking 3 houses down like always. You know, the kind of day where everything feels just routine enough to be invisible. I was cleaning out my husband's car. He'd been asking me to get it detailed for weeks, and I finally gave in. Mostly because I was bored. And partly because I'd noticed something weird the night before. Mark had come home late again. 3rd time that week. Blamed work, like always. But this time, his shirt was buttoned one hole off. You know what I mean? Not wild enough to scream affair, but just wrong. Subtle. Like he got dressed in a rush. Or undressed. Then redressed. I didn't say anything. I just kissed him on the cheek and made dinner like I always did. He joked about being exhausted. I smiled. Inside, I was pulling threads. That's the thing they don't tell you about being cheated on. It doesn't hit you like a slap. It creeps in like fog. Slow. Quiet. Heavy. So I waited until the next morning and offered to clean his car. He kissed my forehead and said, "You're too good to me, Em." Maybe I was. The first half of the car was exactly what I expected. Protein bar wrappers, old receipts, 2 gym towels that should have been burned, not laundered. I was halfway through vacuuming under the passenger seat when I felt it, something wedged between the seat and the floor mat. It was a tube. Generic looking, barely labeled. But I wasn't naive. You know how your stomach flips when your brain figures something out before your eyes do? That's what happened. I stared at it, unmoving, for a full minute. The vacuum was still running. Just noise in the background. White noise. Then I turned it off. It wasn't mine. That much I knew instantly. Mark and I hadn't needed that in a long time. I was tired, working late. He was distracted, working later. Intimacy had become something polite. Quiet. Faint. But here was this vivid little reminder that someone was having fun. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even say his name. You might be wondering, why didn't I confront him right then and there? Why didn't I throw it at his feet, demand answers, get the dramatic showdown he probably deserved? Because I already knew the answers. And because I didn't want his words. Words are too easy. Especially for people like Mark. Mark was charming. The kind of man who could smile his way through an apology and make you feel guilty for asking. He'd done it for years. I knew what the script would be before he even opened his mouth. So instead of fighting, I just swapped the tube. That's all I did. I took it out of the car, slipped it into my coat pocket, drove to the hardware store, and picked up something that looked exactly the same. Same size, same cap, same color, just a little heavier. Industrial strength adhesive. The kind they use in construction. You're judging me, right? That's fair. But here's the thing, everyone has their line. And for me, it wasn't the cheating. It was the lies. The smug little confidence that he could get away with it forever. That I'd never notice. That I'd just stay. So I made the swap. Quiet. Simple. And then I waited. You ever done something you knew you couldn't take back? It changes how you see the world. The next few days were strange. Mark got more affectionate. Like his guilt was bubbling up and bleeding out in tiny, too-late gestures. He brought home flowers. Asked how my day was. Suggested we take a weekend trip. Just us, he said, eyes sparkling. I played along. Smiled. Nodded. Said I'd check my schedule. But inside, I was listening for the tick of a clock I'd set myself. I didn't know when it would happen. Just that it would. The real shift came on Saturday. He was fidgety that morning. Showered twice. Changed his shirt 3 times. Tried to sneak out without making a scene, but I caught him at the door. Going somewhere? I asked. He froze. Just for a second. Then he smiled. Meeting some of the guys from work. Projects behind, and the boss wants us to brainstorm on the weekend. Cute. Rehearsed. I kissed him goodbye. On the cheek, like always. And watched through the window as he left. That was the last normal moment. Because 3 hours later, I heard the scream. It wasn't a normal scream. It was gut deep. I was upstairs folding laundry when it tore through the air, muffled by distance, but unmistakable. You ever hear someone sound like they're being peeled apart? That's what it sounded like. At first, I thought it was a car accident. Or maybe a kid hurt on the street. But then came the sirens. And not one. 3. Police. Ambulance. Fire truck. All racing down our block. And I smiled. Not because I wanted anyone hurt. Not because I had some sadistic thrill about what was coming. But because I knew. I knew where they were going. And I knew who they were going for. It took a lot to not run out the door. I kept folding clothes. Deliberately. Shirt. Pants. Towel. The window was open. I could hear the commotion growing. Voices rising. Commands shouted. A name screamed. Not mine. His. Then came the knock. 3 hard raps. I opened the door to find Lena, our neighbor, face pale, eyes wide. She didn't even say hello. Did you hear what happened? She whispered. I raised an eyebrow. Calm. Perfectly blank. Hear what? She blinked. Mark. He's at Rachel Bloom's house. The paramedics just took them both out. People are saying they had to call a doctor from the hospital to separate them. She stared at me, waiting for a reaction. I gave her none. That's when the officer showed up. Officer Cole. Young. Clean uniform. Eyes flicking between me and Lena, probably trying to gauge the emotional temperature of the front porch. He introduced himself. Asked if I had a moment to talk. I invited him in. He was polite. Professional. Confused. Started asking simple questions. Had I seen Mark that morning? Did he mention where he was going? Was he under any stress? Taking any new medications? I played my part. Said he seemed fine. Just busy with work. And then the officer glanced at something in his notebook and said, the EMTs said there was an adhesive involved. Do you know anything about that? I didn't answer right away. I looked him straight in the eye and said, what kind of adhesive? He stared. I stared back. The silence said more than anything I could have spoken aloud. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't going to end the way I expected. Because people were starting to talk. And Rachel wasn't just the other woman anymore. She was now the headline. The humiliation. The scene. And Mark? He was no longer a liar who got away with it. He was the punchline. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. They say the worst part is the discovery. But they're wrong. It's the waiting. Waiting after you've made a choice you can't take back. After you've planted a seed that will explode, not grow. The moment I shut the door on Officer Cole, my whole house went silent. But not peaceful silent, tense silent. The kind of silence you feel in your chest. Because now there was nothing left for me to do. No more tubes to swap. No more conversations to fake. No more doubt. Just the slow crawl of time and the inevitable collapse at the end of it. I didn't pace. I didn't cry. I just sat at the kitchen table, sipping cold coffee that tasted like nothing. My fingers traced the rim of the mug while outside. The neighbors buzzed like flies around a carcass. You know that part in a thriller movie where the bomb's been set and the camera cuts to every little ticking clock? That's where I was. Except the bomb was him. And the explosion? Already echoing down the block. Let me ask you something. Have you ever wanted to be wrong? Like truly, deeply hoped you had misread everything? Because that was me. Even after the tube. Even after the whispers. Even after Lena's face went pale when she said Rachel Bloom's name like it was a curse. A small part of me, the stupid, soft part, still clung to the idea that maybe I'd misunderstood. That maybe Mark really was at a work meeting. Maybe the tube was from some unrelated, unsexy emergency. Maybe he really was innocent, just bad at explaining. But then came the text. Just 5 words. From a number I didn't recognize. They're taking him to mercy. No punctuation. No name. Just that. A message not from a stranger, but someone who knew I needed to know. Someone who didn't care if I answered. They just wanted me to be aware. I deleted the text. Didn't even blink. Because now it was real. I didn't go to the hospital right away. Why? Because I wasn't invited. And because this wasn't about support. Not anymore. This was about witnessing. He'd made a mess. He'd lied. He'd humiliated me. Now I would watch him unravel. Piece by pathetic piece. The next hour was quiet, in the noisiest way. Neighbors kept walking by casually. Lena peeked over her fence so often I half expected her to offer popcorn. One guy from 3 houses down actually walked his dog back and forth in front of our house 4 times in 10 minutes. I wasn't mad at them. Not really. People love drama, especially when it's not theirs. Especially when it's the clean-cut couple with the perfect lawn and matching monogram towels. That's what we were to them. Now, we were the feature story. I watched it all unfold like I was floating outside my body. The best part? No one knew it started with me. 3 hours passed. 3 full hours. And nothing. No update. No more texts. No knock at the door. Just time. The slow suffocation of it. I tried distracting myself. Folded the same stack of towels twice. Rearranged the spice rack. Opened the fridge 3 times just to stare at the same expired yogurt. My body didn't know what to do without the adrenaline. Until finally, my phone rang. It wasn't a number I recognized. But I answered anyway. Because I already knew who it was. Hi, is this Emily Carter? Yes. This is Mercy General. Your husband was admitted through emergency intake earlier today. Pause. Is he okay? Another pause. Longer. Then, measured words. The kind that have been rehearsed by legal departments. He's stable. But the doctors do need to speak with you in person if you're available to come in. I didn't ask why. I just said I was on my way. The drive to Mercy took 11 minutes. I didn't speed. Didn't listen to music. Didn't call anyone. Just watched the road like it might move out from under me. It's funny. When you drive to see your husband in the hospital, your brain fills with every Lifetime movie and worst-case scenario it can pull out of storage. Car crash. Stroke. Heart failure. But none of those explain the scream. Or the glue. Or the fact that Rachel Bloom was also reportedly being wheeled out of her house by 2 EMTs with their jaws clenched. Still, I wasn't ready for what I was about to see. The hospital waiting room smelled like antiseptic and silence. Everything beige. Everything too bright. I told the nurse who I was. She typed something into a computer, then looked up at me like she knew something I didn't. Dr. Reeves will meet you in consultation room B. Not Mark's room. Not the ER. A consultation room. Translation. Something awkward this way comes. I followed her down the hall. My shoes squeaked slightly with every step. Each doorway we passed made my stomach tighter. And then we stopped. Dr. Alan Reeves looked exactly like the kind of man who didn't like dealing with people. Late 40s. Tired eyes. Faint line where a wedding ring had been being the key word. He didn't greet me. Just gestured toward the chair. And then sat across from me with a clipboard. His first sentence? Your husband and another patient were brought in under extremely unique circumstances. He cleared his throat like the sentence had scratched his soul. I'm going to be as direct as I can be. There was a bonding agent involved. I didn't blink. He studied me, expecting shock. When he didn't get it, he continued. They required surgical intervention. This was not a standard extraction. I finally tilted my head. Are they hurt? He paused, then said carefully. There will be bruising. Minor tearing. Mostly soft tissue. The primary concern now is embarrassment. I let the silence hang. Then I asked the only question that mattered. Is Rachel awake? He blinked, caught off guard. Yes. Why? No reason. What Dr. Reeves didn't say spoke louder than what he did. He didn't say accident. He didn't say medical emergency. He said bonding agent. And extraction. Let me ask you something. How do you unglue your pride from another person in front of 6 strangers? You don't. You just live with it. That's when Dr. Reeves stood up, clipboard under one arm, and said, "Someone from security may ask you a few questions. Just standard protocol." I smiled at him, for the first time that day, and said, "Tell them I'm happy to cooperate." But what came next would unravel the silence I'd held onto like armor. Because as I walked toward Mark's room, I heard a voice I didn't expect. Rachel. Not crying. Not angry. But laughing. High-pitched. Humiliated. Half delirious. "Next time, I'm checking the label." Then someone shushed her. But the damage was done. Because I wasn't the only one who'd heard her. So had Mark. And his face. When he saw me step through that door, that was the beginning of the end. Hospitals have a strange way of making time feel like it's standing still, even while your life is unraveling 1 second at a time. That's exactly how it felt when Mark looked up and saw me standing in that doorway. His face. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't even fear. It was panic. That wild-eyed, soul-hollowing panic of a man who knows he can't lie his way out of this one. Not now. Not with me standing there. Not with Rachel Bloom in the next room, laughing like she'd just accidentally superglued herself to a reality show. You ever seen someone's ego break before their body heals? It's quiet. Mark didn't speak. Didn't ask what I was doing there. Didn't say my name. His mouth opened once. Closed. Instead, he just stared at me, like I was the real emergency in that room. And maybe I was. The nurse shifted uncomfortably beside him, fluffing a pillow he didn't need. Rachel's voice echoed again down the hall, something loud and theatrical about never trusting men with gel-based anything again. Then laughter. From a nurse. Followed by an awkward cough. I didn't move from the doorway. Didn't blink. Just watched my husband sit there in a hospital gown, face pale, eyes darting like a caged animal. You know what struck me the most? He looked small. Not physically, but in presence. This was a man who used to command every room with a grin and a well-timed compliment. He could make waiters laugh. Get discounts at hotels just by existing. Now he was just a man glued to his consequences. The nurse eventually cleared her throat. Would you like a moment with your husband? I let the silence hang for a beat too long before I replied. No. Then I turned and walked back out the door. I didn't go home right away. I needed air. Not the recycled hospital kind. Not the sterile scent of antiseptic and shame. I needed real air. So I walked. Down the street. Around the corner. Past a grocery store I didn't need anything from. And that's when the call came. Not from the hospital. Not from Mark. But from her. Rachel Bloom. Her number popped up with no warning. No name saved in my phone, of course, but I knew. The area code. The audacity. And the fact that only one woman in my life would have the nerve to call me after that. I answered. Didn't say hello. Just waited. Silence for 1 beat. 2. Then, "You're colder than I thought, I smiled. "You're dumber than I expected, Rachel." That shut her up for a second. Then came the defense. "Look, I didn't know." "Okay. I thought he said you were basically just roommates. He made it sound like your marriage was over." I didn't interrupt. Let her dig. "And what? You thought glue was a message? That's psychotic." "Is it?" I asked calmly. "Yes," she snapped. I tilted my head. "And sleeping with a married man isn't?" More silence. She tried again. "You didn't have to do this. You could have just left him." I laughed. Short. Sharp. "Rachel, you think I did this for him?" Another silence. This one longer. It was the moment she realized what I meant. I wasn't warning Mark. I wasn't getting even. I was done pretending. This wasn't revenge. This was closure. Unignorable. Permanent. Sticky. Rachel hung up. No goodbye. No apology. Just dead air. I stared at my phone for a moment. Then kept walking. By the time I got back home, Lena was outside again. She was pretending to water her plants, even though it was dusk and her hose wasn't even on. Nosy. Predictable. She waved. I nodded. She gave me the look, the one that begged for details without asking for them out loud. I didn't offer any. She called out, Heard they had to call someone from another hospital to help. Can you believe that? I stopped. Turned slowly. Believe it? I said. I planned it. And then I went inside. The house felt different. Not haunted, just emptied. Like I'd finally opened a window that had been sealed shut for years and let the air in. Everything was clearer. Sharper. Colder. Mark's coat was still on the hook. His cologne sat on the bathroom counter. All these little pieces of him just waiting. But he wouldn't be coming back to get them. Not without facing me. That night, the phone rang again. This time, it was Mark. He didn't say hello. Didn't say my name. Just why. I didn't answer. I waited. He tried again. You could have just told me you knew. You didn't have to humiliate me. I almost laughed. But I didn't. You mean like you did? I asked. He exhaled. Angry. You don't understand. I was. Lonely? I cut him off. Unhappy? Needing something new? Spare me the cliches. I made a mistake, he said, voice suddenly small. No, Mark. You made a choice. Silence. Then, finally, he said it. Was it glue? That was the first honest thing he'd asked in months. I could have denied it. Pretended like it was a coincidence. Let him doubt. But I was done playing nice. Yes. You could have hurt me. You were already hurting me, I said. For months. Another silence. He didn't argue. Because he knew. And knowing made it worse. He asked one more question before he hung up. A quiet, broken whisper of a question. Are you going to tell people? I thought about it. I thought about Lena. About the nurse. About Rachel laughing like a punchline echoing through sterile halls. Then I answered. I don't have to. When I hung up, I stood at the window. The street was dark now. Quiet. But I knew better. Tomorrow, the whispers would start. But tonight? Tonight was mine. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that this wasn't over. Not yet. Because the next morning, I got another knock at the door. And this time, it wasn't a neighbor. It was the police. When the police knock on your door at 8 in the morning, you don't ask who it is. You already know your life has crossed a line where explanations don't come gently anymore. I opened the door to Officer Cole again, same uniform, same careful posture, but this time, his expression had changed. Less confusion. More calculation. Like he'd slept on it. Mrs. Carter, he said. May we come in? I stepped aside without a word. This wasn't fear. This was inevitability. He didn't sit right away. Just stood there in my living room, scanning the space. The couch Mark and I picked together. The framed wedding photo, still on the wall, us smiling like we'd already won something. Officer Cole finally spoke. We're trying to establish a timeline. I nodded. Of what? Your husband's movements. And his relationship with Rachel Bloom. There it was. Her name. Out in the open now. No whispers. No euphemisms. No pretending she was just a colleague or a friend from work. Rachel Bloom had stepped fully into the light. And she did not look good there. Do you know Ms. Bloom personally? He asked. I considered lying. Not because I was afraid, but because the truth was so much worse. I've met her, I said. Once. He raised an eyebrow. Only once. Yes. When was that? I smiled faintly. At my birthday dinner. Last year. That got his attention. He flipped a page in his notebook. And at the time, did you know she and your husband were involved? No. Did you suspect? I paused. Then said I didn't have a reason to. Back then. Officer Cole nodded slowly, like he was filing that answer into a box labeled use later. Here's the thing about Rachel Bloom. She wasn't invisible. She wasn't some secret shadow woman who crept around in the dark. She was loud, confident, sharp elbows and sharper jokes. The kind of woman who takes up space and dares you to challenge her for it. When I met her at my birthday dinner, she wore red. Not subtle red. Not wine red. Fire engine red. And she'd hugged Mark just a second too long. I noticed. Of course I did. But at the time, I chalked it up to her personality. Some people are just like that. Too familiar. Too comfortable. Too sure of their place. Turns out she was. Officer Cole cleared his throat. Ms. Bloom claims she had no knowledge your husband was married. I laughed before I could stop myself. He looked up sharply. Something funny? No, I said. Just ironic. How so? She came to my birthday dinner. In my house. She drank wine I bought and complimented the meal I cooked. If she didn't know he was married, she wasn't paying attention. Or she didn't care. I didn't say that part out loud. He scribbled something down. Then he asked the question I'd been waiting for. Did you alter any personal items belonging to your husband prior to the incident? There it was. I met his eyes. Yes. He didn't react. Not outwardly. Just waited. I replaced something in his car, I continued. Something that wasn't mine. With what? I leaned back against the counter. With something else. Silence. Then, do you understand that could be considered intent to harm? I shrugged. Do you understand that cheating is considered intent to deceive? That earned me a long look. But no handcuffs. Not yet. After Officer Cole left, I did something I hadn't done in days. I sat down. Because suddenly, Rachel Bloom wasn't just a character in my story. She was becoming a liability. An hour later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Again. I answered. Emily, Rachel said, her voice quieter now. Less sharp. More frayed. They're saying I might lose my job. I closed my eyes. Congratulations, I said. Now you know how I felt. She exhaled shakily. They're investigating. HR, legal. Everyone's acting like I'm the problem. You are, I replied. No, Mark lied to both of us. Did he? I asked. Or did you just like the version of the truth that made you feel special? She didn't answer. That told me everything. She started crying then. Real crying. Not performative. Not dramatic. Just small, broken sounds leaking through the phone. I didn't think it would end like this, she whispered. I almost said something kind. Almost. But then I remembered her laugh in the hospital hallway. The joke. The label. So instead I said, you didn't think it would end at all. She hung up on me. Later that afternoon, I finally went back to the hospital. Not for Mark. For answers. Rachel was being discharged when I arrived. She was in a wheelchair, wrapped in a blanket, hair messy, eyes red. Not glamorous. Not powerful. Just exposed. She saw me before I could avoid her. Emily, she said. Wait. I stopped. People around us slowed, pretending not to watch. She swallowed hard. I'm sorry. I believed her. That was the worst part. Sorry for what? I asked. For getting caught, she said honestly. At least she'd learned something. Mark watched from down the hall. I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. Because Rachel leaned closer and said something only I could hear. He's blaming you. I smiled. Of course he is. She hesitated. He says you planned this. I did. Her eyes widened. Not in fear. In understanding. And, just like that, the power shifted. As she was wheeled away, Rachel Bloom stopped being the woman my husband cheated with. She became a witness. And witnesses talk. Which is how, 2 days later, I got another call. This time from a lawyer. And this time, they weren't asking questions. They were issuing warnings. Because Mark had decided to stop being ashamed. And start being angry. Hospitals have doors they don't want families opening. Rooms where paperwork matters more than people. Rooms where decisions are made by those with degrees on the walls and damage in their eyes. That's where I found myself 2 days after Rachel Bloom wheeled her way out of my life. Not at Mark's bedside. In a small, windowless conference room, again, with the same clipboard, same doctor, and a new guest at the table. A lawyer. Not mine. His. Let's rewind for a second. That morning, I got a call. Private number. I answered out of instinct, not curiosity. Mrs. Carter, this is John Ledger. I'm representing your husband in relation to the recent medical incident involving himself and MS. Bloom. Medical incident. Like he'd accidentally swallowed a peanut. I didn't speak. So he continued. There's some concern about what occurred and whether certain items were tampered with in a way that could be considered malicious. So we'd crossed that line now. The quiet blame. The unspoken suggestion. The positioning. I wasn't just the wife anymore. I was becoming the cause. So I agreed to meet. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to look them in the eye when they tried to rewrite history. Dr. Reeves was already seated when I arrived, looking more exhausted than last time. Maybe he'd finally realized this wasn't just an ER horror story to laugh about in the staff lounge. John Ledger sat next to him. Expensive suit. Cheap energy. He stood as I entered. Offered a handshake. I didn't take it. He cleared his throat and motioned to the chair across from him. Thanks for coming. I didn't come for you, I said. I came for clarity. Here's how the conversation went. He started with pleasantries. Legal jargon dressed up as diplomacy. Then he leaned in, folded his hands, and said, "We're trying to avoid escalation." Of course they were. He didn't want this in court. Didn't want it in public. Because once this story made the rounds, the cheating, the glue, the ER extraction, it wouldn't just be Mark's pride that stuck. It would be his reputation. And Mark Carter cared about one thing more than anything else. Being admired. Your husband is very distressed, Ledger said. He should be, I replied. Dr. Reeves shifted uncomfortably. Ledger kept going. We're hoping to handle this quietly. But there are questions about your involvement. About motive. Motive. The word hung in the air like steam over a fresh burn. So I smiled. Do you have proof of my involvement? He paused. We have testimony. From whom? He hesitated. Rachel? I asked. No response. I leaned forward. She'll fold. She always does. Dr. Reeves finally spoke up, his voice low. This isn't a legal hearing, Mrs. Carter. We're just trying to understand. But I wasn't here to help them understand. I was here to let them worry. Let me ask you something. When someone betrays you, how far would you go to make sure they never forget? I don't mean revenge in the movie sense, explosions, affairs, screaming matches. I mean a scar. Something no amount of PR or apologies could erase. Because that's what I'd left Mark with. Not physical damage. Not permanent harm. But humiliation. The kind that seeps into every part of your identity and never fully washes out. They could call it a medical incident. I called it closure. Ledger shifted gears. We believe you may have switched items found in your husband's vehicle. I did, I said without hesitation. He blinked. I found something that didn't belong to me. I removed it. And replaced it, he asked. With something more appropriate. Dr. Reeves coughed into his hand. Ledger tried to look stern. You understand the potential consequences of your actions? Do you? I shot back. He frowned. Excuse me. I sat back in the chair. I didn't tamper with his car. I removed trash. I added a new product. I never forced him to use it. That was his choice. Technically true. Ledger opened his mouth to respond, then stopped. Because he knew I'd played the game better than he expected. You want to know what happens when a man like Mark Carter feels powerless? He delegates his fear. He sends lawyers instead of apologies. He hides behind silence until someone else starts talking for him. But the thing about hiding is this. Eventually, the curtain gets pulled back. Dr. Reeves finally stood. I think we're done here. But as I turned to leave, Ledger said one last thing. Emily, you might win this round. But if this escalates, the story gets out. Your name goes with it. He meant it as a threat. I took it as a promise. Good, I said. Let people know what happens when you lie to the wrong woman. And I walked out. The air outside felt heavier that day. Not because of the weather, but because I knew what was coming. Mark was going to spin this. Try to twist it into some sob story where he was the victim of a deranged wife. Rachel would backpedal. Maybe even delete her social media. Say it was all a misunderstanding. Claim she was manipulated. They'd both try to erase what happened. But the truth? The truth was sticky. Literally and figuratively. Later that night, I got a text. From Mark. You don't know what you've started. I stared at it for a full minute. Then I replied. No, Mark. You don't. Because the thing about pulling back the curtain? You never know what the audience is going to do next. And this audience. Our neighbors, our coworkers, the people who smiled at us at dinner parties. They weren't on his side anymore. Not after what they'd heard. Not after what they'd seen. The next morning, Lena stopped me in the driveway. She looked unsure. Like she wanted to say something, but didn't know how. "I heard they're talking to a reporter," she whispered. "Who?" I asked. "Someone from Channel 5. Supposedly, the hospital leaked it." I raised an eyebrow. She leaned in closer. "They're calling it the glue affair." I couldn't help it. I laughed. Not politely. Not awkwardly. I really laughed. Because this wasn't just a mess anymore. It was a spectacle. And once something becomes entertainment, you can't control it anymore. Not even Mark. But what came next wasn't a headline. It wasn't a legal threat. It wasn't even a fight. It was something far, far worse. Mark came home. And he wasn't alone. You never really know how much your neighbors are watching you until something juicy happens. Then suddenly, they all become part-time detectives. Body language analysts. Whisper professionals. And let me tell you, nothing gets the neighborhood more riled up than the return of a disgraced husband who'd just made headlines as the man who got glued. The morning Mark came home, it was like a storm warning had hit the block. Only instead of boarding up windows, people were opening them. They wanted to see. It started with the sound of a car door. I was in the kitchen, making toast I wasn't going to eat, when I heard it slow, creaky, hesitant. Followed by footsteps. Then another door. He wasn't alone. I stepped to the window and pulled back the curtain just enough to peek. There he was. Mark Carter. Hospital bracelet still on. Bruised pride dragging behind him like luggage. And behind him? His mother. Oh yes. He brought his mother. Because when your ego's bleeding out, nothing says damage control like bringing in the one woman who still thinks you're an angel. I didn't go to the door. Let them knock. Which they did. Twice. Soft, polite. Not the kind of knock that demands entry. The kind that begs it. But I stayed in the kitchen, sipping lukewarm coffee, listening. Finally, I heard his voice. "Emily?" Not angry. Not arrogant. Just deflated. Then his mother's voice tighter, full of performative concern. "Emily, dear, we just want to talk." "Of course we do." As if she was ever part of this marriage. I waited a full minute. Then another. Eventually, the footsteps retreated. And that's when the whispers started. Lena texted me first. "He's on the porch." I didn't answer. Then came Susan from across the street. "Is everything okay?" And then, "I don't mean to pry, but are you safe?" Safe. Funny how fast they go from curious to concerned once a man gets media attention for something embarrassing. If he had hit me, they might have looked the other way. But glue? Glue was newsworthy. I finally opened the front door. Mark was still out there, pacing nervously. His mom sat on the porch swing like she owned it. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. Neither of them spoke at first. Then Mark cleared his throat. "I'm not here to fight." I nodded. "Good. You wouldn't win." His mom bristled. "Emily, I think we need to approach this with grace. This could have happened to anyone." "No," I said, cutting her off. "This could have happened to someone who cheats. Which means it couldn't have happened to me." Her mouth snapped shut. Mark stepped in quickly. "Look, I'm not defending what I did. I messed up." "Messed up?" I echoed. He swallowed. "It was stupid. It was a mistake. You glued yourself to your mistress, Mark." His mom gasped. Mark flinched. "That's not a mistake. That's a consequence. Let me ask you something. Why is it that the cheater always wants to have a conversation after they've been exposed? Why is it only when their reputation's been hit do they suddenly rediscover words like transparency and growth? Where was that when he was sneaking around? Where was that when he was lying to my face?" Mark's voice softened. "Can we at least talk?" "Alone." I shook my head. "We had plenty of time to talk. You used it lying." "Emily, please." And that's when I noticed it. 3 houses down. Someone filming. Not discreetly. Phone up. Barely hidden behind a rose bush. And across the street? A curtain twitched. The neighborhood wasn't just watching anymore. They were documenting. Mark noticed too. His face went pale. He turned toward the street and then looked back at me. "Do you want this to go viral?" I didn't blink. It already has. That was the moment it sunk in. This wasn't private anymore. There were no quiet resolutions coming. Not for him. Not for me. And definitely not for Rachel Bloom, whose name was now trending in places she never wanted to be mentioned. He stepped forward slightly, lowering his voice. You don't have to destroy me. That made me laugh. Destroy you. I leaned in. You did that to yourself, Mark. I just gave everyone a front row seat. He opened his mouth, but no words came. His mother stood up, clearly deciding she'd had enough of my tone. We're going to speak to a lawyer. Already did, I said. That stopped her. Mark looked confused. Then worried. He knew what that meant. I wasn't bluffing anymore. I went back inside without another word. Didn't slam the door. Didn't shout. Just closed it. Softly. Letting the silence speak for me. And as I stood behind the glass, I watched him walk away. For the first time, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel love. I felt nothing. And that was worse. But the neighborhood wasn't done. Later that evening, I got a message from someone I barely knew, Carol, who lived 4 doors down. She ran the local Facebook group. Hi Emily, it read. I just wanted to let you know there's a thread about what happened going around. I've muted some of the worst comments, but people are asking questions. Of course they were. This wasn't just gossip anymore. It was spectacle. It was entertainment. The glue incident had turned our cul-de-sac into a true crime miniseries. Only the villain wasn't who they expected. It wasn't me. It was the man who walked back onto his own porch and realized he no longer owned the story. The next day, I got a letter in the mail. From the hospital. And it wasn't about billing. It was about liability. Because now, they weren't just dealing with a bizarre ER case. They were bracing for a lawsuit. And this time, the glue wasn't sticking to Mark. It was sticking to me. Truth doesn't always hit like a slap. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it drips in slow, agonizing drops until the weight of it finally breaks the dam. But sometimes, it just walks into your kitchen at 9 p.m. Uninvited. Holding a manila envelope. That's how I got mine. I was halfway through a glass of wine I didn't want and a rerun I wasn't watching when I heard the key turn. Yes, the key. Mark still had one. I hadn't asked for it back. Part of me hoped he'd try to use it. Because at this point, I wanted the confrontation. The performance. The last act. And here he was, right on cue. He stepped inside like a man returning to a place he used to own, but now had to ask permission just to stand in. I didn't move from the kitchen. I let him come to me. He looked different. Not thinner. Not bruised. Just tired in a way that couldn't be slept off. Mark Carter, the man who once rehearsed his own mirror smile before client meetings, now had stubble on his chin and a permanent crease between his eyebrows. He held the envelope like it might bite him. And maybe it would. I'm not here to fight, he said. You never are, I replied. He placed the envelope on the counter and slid it toward me like a peace offering. What's that? I asked. He swallowed. My version. Let me ask you something. Would you read a letter from the person who broke you? Would you open their soul if they offered it? Or would you light a match and let the ashes tell the story instead? I picked up the envelope but didn't open it. You know what's funny? I asked, meeting his eyes. I didn't ask for an explanation. I know, he said. But I need to give you one. Of course he did. Because men like Mark can't sit in silence. They need someone to absorb their regret. To receive their pain. It's not enough to be sorry. They need to be seen being sorry. I walked to the sink and dropped the envelope in the trash. He flinched. And that's when the mask cracked. Emily, please, he said, stepping forward. You think I planned for any of this? You think I wanted this to happen? No, I said calmly. I think you thought it never would. He paused. And then said something he hadn't before. I didn't cheat because of you. I tilted my head. Is that supposed to help? It's the truth. No, Mark. The truth is, you cheated because it was easy. He sat down hard. Ran a hand through his hair. I was stupid. Yes. I didn't think I'd get caught. No, you didn't. He looked up at me. Eyes red. I thought we were over. You didn't touch me. We didn't talk. It was like we were just roommates. I nodded. I felt that too, I said. But I didn't glue myself to a coworker to feel alive again. He exhaled sharply. A sound between a laugh and a sob. You could have just left. No, I said. You could have. Here's what most people don't understand. When someone cheats, the betrayal isn't just physical. It's mental, emotional, logistical. They plan it. They hide it. They protect it. And in doing so, they rewrite you in their head as the villain so they can sleep at night. I saw it in his face then. He was trying to remember the version of me he used to love before I became the obstacle in his story. But I wasn't the obstacle. I was the author. And he'd just tried to rewrite my ending without my permission. He stood again. Quietly. Like every bone in his body had aged 10 years. I know I ruined everything. I stayed silent. I know people are laughing at me. Still silent. But the worst part, the part one can't stop thinking about. He looked at me then. Is that I deserved it. And for the first time, I believed him. But it didn't change anything. Because guilt is just a ghost. It haunts the person who caused it, but it doesn't rebuild what they tore down. I'm filing for divorce, I said. He nodded. I'll sign whatever you want. I believe he meant it. But he still waited there. Like there was something else he wanted. Something unsaid. And then he asked the question. The one I knew would come eventually. The glue. It was you, right? I looked him dead in the eye. Yes. He didn't yell. Didn't beg. Didn't even ask how I did it. He just nodded. And whispered, okay. That one word carried more weight than any argument we could have had. Because now, we were done lying. After he left, I poured the rest of the wine down the drain. Then I went to the trash and pulled out the envelope. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Because the truth was already out. Not in writing. In living. And now? Now I was free. But here's the part you won't believe. 2 days later, someone knocked on my door again. It wasn't Mark. It wasn't Rachel. It wasn't a neighbor. It was a stranger in a suit. With a microphone. And a cameraman behind him. Because apparently, the glue affair had gone national. And they wanted my side of the story. You ever watch your life get turned into content? Because that's what happened next. Not just gossip. Not just whispers on a cul-de-sac. Content. Clickable. Shareable. Digestible. My life. My marriage. My humiliation. All wrapped up in a 7-minute segment with dramatic piano music, B-roll of suburban streets, and a voiceover that called it a sticky situation with a twist. Funny, right? Except I wasn't laughing. Not anymore. Because once the internet gets a hold of your pain, it doesn't let go. It screenshots it. Memes it. Sells ads next to it. The reporter was polite. Too polite. The kind of nice that makes your skin itch. His name was Brandon. Press badge, crisp shirt, soft voice, fake empathy in his eyes. He stood on my porch like he was offering salvation. We're doing a piece on accountability and modern relationships, he said. You don't have to go on camera. We can blur your face. Change your voice. He smiled like he was doing me a favor. I just want people to hear your truth. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because he actually thought the truth still mattered. Let me ask you something. How do you protect your story when everyone already thinks they've heard it? When a 10-second clip of you closing your door on your cheating husband has already racked up 2.3 million views? When #GluedGuy is trending and your neighbors are giving interviews to tabloids about the nicest woman who turned out to be savage as hell, how do you get your life back? The short answer? You don't. You bury the old one. And build something else on top of it. But before I could do that, I had to face the cost. Because the revenge? It felt good for 5 minutes. The fallout? That lasted longer. The first consequence was my job. I work in HR, ironically. The place that's supposed to care about ethics, trust, and professional boundaries. So when a story goes viral about how you maybe orchestrated a hospital-level incident involving your husband's anatomy and a tube of industrial adhesive, let's just say the board gets nervous. They called me in. Didn't even pretend it was informal. 3 people. 2 notepads. 1 fake bottle of water. We respect your privacy, they said. But this has become a distraction, they added. You haven't violated policy, but that but is where the real decision lives. They gave me two choices. Step away quietly, or stay while being silently marked. So I chose the first. I walked out of the building with my dignity intact barely and my future in a cardboard box. The second consequence was my friends. Or should I say, acquaintances pretending to be neutral. They didn't take sides, they claimed. They were just staying out of it. But silence is a side. And they weren't silent when Mark was posting long-winded apologies about navigating difficult emotions and doing the work to become a better man. They liked every post. Left comments like, "Growth is beautiful." No one asked what it was like to sleep next to someone who lies with their phone under their pillow. No one checked if I was okay when my face was blurred in the background of a news report labeled, "When Wives Snap." No one asked me anything at all. So yeah, the truth cost me. My job, my comfort, my friends, my privacy, even my peace. But you know what? It was worth it. Because the third thing it cost me was him. And that was a discount. Mark tried to spin the story, of course. He started small, private messages to mutual friends. She set me up. She wanted to punish me. She's not who you think she is. He even tried to write a blog post. Yes, a blog. Entitled, "When Marriage Turns Toxic, My Story." But here's the thing about narratives. They only stick if people believe the narrator. And Mark? He was already a punchline. You can't be the victim when your nickname is Glue Guy. No one sympathizes with a man who had to be surgically unstuck from his mistress. That's not a tragedy. That's a cautionary tale. The fourth cost? The silence after it all went quiet. Once the headlines faded. Once the likes slowed down. Once the neighbors got bored and moved on to the next scandal. The silence came creeping in. No more texts. No more calls. No more chaos. Just me. Sitting in a house that used to feel like home. And now just felt like evidence. That was the hardest part. The echo. The way I could hear every version of myself that lived there. The trusting wife. The quiet observer. The woman with the glue. You think I regret it? No, not for a second. Because that version of me, the one who stayed silent for too long, she's gone. And the woman left in her place? She doesn't wait for permission. She doesn't beg for honesty. She doesn't ask for closure. She makes it. Last week, I got a message. From someone I don't know. A woman. She wrote, "I just got cheated on. I saw your story. I didn't glue anything, but I did walk away. So thank you." And for the first time in a while, I smiled. Because maybe this story isn't just about embarrassment. Maybe it's about release. Not just from a man, but from the version of yourself that let him in. But just when I thought it was over. The doorbell rang. Again. This time, Mark. Alone. No mother. No lawyer. No performance. Just him. Looking smaller than ever. He held up a single envelope. Divorce papers. Already signed. And on top of them, the tube I replaced. Cleaned off. Empty. Silent. "I'm done fighting," he said. "I know," I replied. And I took it from him. Not the glue. Not the papers. The power. All of it. And I closed the door one final time. You'd think divorce papers would be the end. But liars don't go down quiet. They leave a trail. One last breadcrumb. One final lie, wrapped in paperwork and signed in ink. Mark had delivered the envelope himself. Neatly signed. No arguments. No speech. Just one clean gesture that was supposed to mean I'm done. But when I opened the folder, there was something else inside. A bank statement. Accidentally, or maybe intentionally, left clipped behind the paperwork. And that's when I saw it. A charge from 2 months earlier. Hotel. Out of town. Under his name. During the week he told me he was visiting his sick cousin. Which, by the way, he doesn't have. It didn't make me cry. Didn't even make me mad. I just laughed. Because the man had been glued to another woman in a hospital, had his name dragged across national media, signed away a marriage he once called perfect. And he still thought he had secrets. Still thought he could get away with just one more lie. That's when I realized. Men like Mark don't stop cheating. They just change how. Let me ask you something. How many lies does it take to finally see someone clearly? Is it 1? 10? Or do you need to live inside the lie, breathe it in, let it rearrange your DNA before you finally say, no more? Because I'd reached that point. Not the breaking point. The clarity point. I wasn't going to call him out. I wasn't going to ask who it was. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of knowing he still had the power to hurt me. I just filed it away. Not for court. Not for revenge. For me. But that wasn't the only breadcrumb. 3 days later, I got a message on Facebook. From someone named Danielle. No profile picture. No mutual friends. Just one sentence. You don't know the whole story. I almost ignored it. Almost. But curiosity is a traitor. I replied, then tell me. Her answer came fast. Rachel wasn't the only one. She just got caught. I didn't reply. Didn't need to. Because deep down I knew. I always knew. Rachel was just the headline. But the rest? They were the footnotes. The coworkers. The late-night meetings. The business trips that always ended in bad service and no receipts. I used to wonder how he could look me in the eye afterward. Now I realized. He probably didn't see me at all. Just a reflection of who he was supposed to be. The loyal husband. The good guy. The image. But the real Mark? He lived in the shadows. Behind every locked phone screen. Every vague text. Every deodorized lie. The last lie didn't break me. It built me. Because now I wasn't just the woman who got cheated on. I wasn't the glue wife. I wasn't the headline. I was the closer. The one who finished the story when he couldn't even tell the truth. A week later, I burned the envelope. Not out of rage. But as a ritual. No screaming. No dramatic music. Just fire. Clean. Final. Because some stories don't need to be archived. They need to be erased. The next day, I packed a box. Just one. Not to leave. To begin again. I put in my favorite mug. A framed photo of just me. A journal. The divorce decree. And a tiny glass vial. Inside it? Not the glue. But the ashes of the paper he left behind. A reminder that I could be both the fire. And the woman who walked away from it. But just when I thought the story had nothing left to give, Lena knocked on my door. Holding a small package. Brown paper. No return address. Inside? A note. I told you he wasn't done. And underneath it, a flash drive. The thing about closure is, it never arrives the way you expect. You think it'll be a speech. A slammed door. A court ruling. A confession on a voicemail at 2 a.m. But sometimes, it comes in a cheap manila envelope. No return address. Dropped off by your nosy neighbor. With a flash drive inside. And a note that says, I told you he wasn't done. I stared at the drive for a long time. Long enough for the coffee in my mug to go cold. Long enough to wonder what kind of person I'd become that this didn't even spike my pulse anymore. What else could it be? Photos? Recordings? Apologies? Threats? Or was this just one last middle finger from a man who couldn't walk away quietly? I didn't plug it in that night. I just left it on the counter next to the sink. Between the dish soap and the life I was rebuilding. But it called to me. Because curiosity is still curiosity. Even after everything. Even after the glue. The doctors. The lawyers. The shame. The viral TikToks. The neighbors whispering that's her behind their fences. Even after the last lie. The next morning I watched the footage. It was a single video. Grainy. Cell phone quality. Rachel Bloom. At a party. Laughing. Drunk. Talking to someone behind the camera. She didn't know she was being filmed. I knew the voice off screen though. Mark's. He was coaching her. Prompting her. Saying things like, say how she set us up. Say she's crazy. Say it wasn't your fault. And she did. She repeated every word. Not because it was true. But because she wanted to keep him. Even then. Even after the hospital. Even after the glue. Let me ask you something. Have you ever seen someone destroy their own defense in under 2 minutes? Because that's what this was. It wasn't just evidence. It was proof. Proof that he'd tried to spin it. Frame me. Rewrite the story one more time before the credits rolled. I copied the file to a secure drive. Did I plan to use it? No, but it felt good to have it. Like a spare key to a room I never planned to enter again. But if I had to, I wouldn't knock. So what happened next? Not much. And that's the best part. No more reporters. No more drama. No more Mark. Just silence. And choices. I kept the house. Not because I needed it, but because I refused to give it up. I painted the bedroom. Changed the locks. Took down the wedding photos and replaced them with art I actually liked. I started sleeping better. No more wondering where he was. No more reaching for a man who wasn't reaching back. No more waiting for truth that was never coming. Some nights I sit on the porch. Same swing his mother once sat on, arms crossed, trying to convince me it was all just a rough patch. But now it's mine. The wind is quiet. The street is still. And the neighbors? They nod respectfully now. Because I'm not just the woman who got cheated on. I'm the one who left nothing unsaid. The one who didn't scream. Didn't throw plates. Didn't lose her mind. I just let him destroy himself. And kept the receipts. I get asked sometimes in quiet messages from strangers online. Do you regret it? No. Because sometimes the only way to get a man's attention is to glue it to the consequences. But here's what I didn't expect. Peace. Real peace. Not the fake kind where you pretend to be fine in group photos and force smiles during holidays. Actual stillness. A space to breathe without waiting for the next betrayal. I've learned that peace doesn't always arrive like light through a window. Sometimes it comes as a single decision. A silent one. A switch flipped in the dark. Would I do it again? No. Because I'd never let it get that far next time. I see the signs now. I hear the quiet shifts in voice. The changed passwords. The unreturned glances. I don't let people gaslight me into staying polite while they dig their own escape tunnel. So, what did I learn? That betrayal is never just about the other person. It's about what you do after. Whether you let it define you or refine you. And me? I got sharper, cleaner, quieter, dangerous in all the best ways. The glue didn't ruin me. It reminded me that no one can leave you stuck unless you decide to stay. So now I'll ask you. If you had the chance to make your own ending, your ending, not the one they scripted for you, would you take it? Would you rewrite the rules? Would you walk away? Or would you stand quietly, smiling, while they realize too late they picked the wrong woman to lie to? Because I did. And I don't regret a single step. Thanks for watching. If you've ever been betrayed, or underestimated, or called crazy for connecting the dots, leave a comment. Tell your story. Or just type one word. Free. Because we don't always get closure from the people who hurt us. Sometimes, we give it to ourselves.